Yeah, we're welcoming Noel Wilson again, CEO and founder of Intelligenic.ai for this second part, a two-part series. And in this part, we're going to talk more about the future, designing the future, AI strategy, infrastructure, human collaboration. We know Noel Wilson is the founder of Intelligenic.ai. Welcome again, Noel. Thank you again. Just to kick off again in this second part, how should companies think about building an AI strategy in 2025? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that it needs to be core to everything that they're considering. In our first part, we talked a lot about Intelligenic and how Intelligenic assists organizations with software development. But that's just one
Right.
workflow.
Right.
You literally can use it for just about everything that you're working with. And if you do, you will see just amazing returns and your ability to be able to do so much more. There's a perfect example. I have a very small and lean team here at Intelligenic. I don't have a marketing department. You're looking at the marketing department, right?
Right. Right.
But as the value of content marketing,
Right.
but it's no joke creating all that content. Like, traditionally there are teams of people that are coming up with like, what's the new topic that I'm going to talk about related to my company and how is that relevant? Let's create all that. And you have like a whole publishing calendar and you need to do it on a regular cadence. If you have a small team like I do, and it's primarily myself, with some help from some of the other team members to create it,
Right.
it's hard to do that.
Right.
Artificial intelligence is something that you can use that will bridge that gap from lack of resources to being able to produce high quality content on a pretty consistent basis. It's
Right.
key to
It's
our
key.
strategy. So we
Yeah.
publish content on a weekly basis, but the way that we do that is by putting in our general ideas related to artificial intelligence and software development and how it can enhance the workflow and improve productivity. We put that into the models that we already use to generate the content for our marketing, publishing that we do on a weekly basis. You still have to have a human in the loop. So I'm always,
Always in the
editing and
loop.
making sure that it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't, and it needs to, right? But just by virtue of having access to tools like that to accelerate that process, that has just made us much more relevant. It gets more interest in our company. As a result, we've got over 7,000 followers of our company on LinkedIn. I personally have like 7,000 plus followers. So all those things together, really represent a great example of how you can use artificial intelligence in many other ways beyond just software development. So I encourage all organizations to really think long and hard about these workflows that they're already performing and executing and how they can use artificial intelligence to enhance their ability to execute on that workflow much more efficiently than they do today.
Yeah. So it's the most companies, to be honest, are hesitant, apart from the big companies, but a lot of companies are. There's so many questions now. People are looking at. They want to adopt artificial intelligence. Should they adopt? Should they not adopt? You feel like, is it going to be like what impact is it going to have on the job market, on the labor and things like that, the cost? And there are many questions about data security, like companies are trying to figure out how they could train their users on using it, or how they could protect themselves from artificial intelligence companies like LLMs that people know, like Gemini, ChatGPT, and most people are using this at works, and companies are trying to protect. But what I want to ask you is about what are the biggest mistakes companies make when trying to adopt AI? Do they have any
And
mistakes
this
they
is
make? Maybe quickly, what are the busy or the challenge, or maybe or not even adopting AI?
the number one mistake that I'd highlight. If you're not adopting AI, you're putting yourself at a strategic disadvantage
Disadvantage.
because you're going to have other companies that are absolutely fully embracing it for just about everything that they're doing. In my company's example, it's been a force multiplier. Not only do we have a platform that facilitates the ability to be more productive in software development, everything that's gone into that platform that we're now offering to our customers is what we do internally
Right.
to accelerate our move. And as a result, it's enabled us to be able to produce a commercially viable platform in a matter of months and prepare us, to be able to take that to market and commercialize it. That was unheard of several years ago. You could not do that. So I'd say that'd be the first thing. It's just, you have to have a strategy. Like, how are you going to use it? Begin to think about the different workflows that you are currently executing that are highly manual in nature, and figure out ways that you might be able to automate some of those workflows using some of these artificial intelligence tools. I think another challenge that organizations are faced, I apologize, but I'm going to have to use the same workflow that I focus on.
Yeah.
It's software development related. There's a misunderstanding of what's possible with artificial intelligence. Everybody really believes mostly that you can, with a few prompts and very little information, get artificial intelligence to build a highly complex piece of software. And that's not the reality. It's really good if you take that approach in producing prototypes and simple applications. But if you wanted to create like a complex banking app that would integrate with someone else's complex banking app, forget it. The existing off-the-shelf solutions today don't work that way. They require a high level of expertise to be able to get something meaningful to work out. The more complex the solution and the more problematic the outcome will be. And so what I always recommend to people is that in that software development workflow, don't make the mistake of trying to do too much with it. Break the work that you're trying to accomplish down into much more manageable tasks, much like you would in traditional software development. You're never going to ask your development team to go out and build that banking application that I mentioned to integrate with your bank. You start there, but you need to get to the point where you define very specific manageable tasks you can assign to humans to perform the activities, produce the software. It's exactly the same way that these models work. Just think of AI as a virtual human. If you wanted to ask a human to do something, you would give them a very specific and manageable task, with a very measurable outcome. If you take that same approach when you're using artificial intelligence, you'll be surprised. The outcomes that it's able to produce are much higher in quality. They're going to be much more relevant to what you've asked it to do. And there will be much greater alignment in what you were expecting.
So more and more companies are trying to adopt AI, somewhat quickly, somewhat taking a slower approach. What would you advise? And most of this AI, either agents or artificial intelligence approach, some of them is a lot more humanized now than a couple of months or years ago, in such a way that agent can give you a phone call, an agent can reply to your emails, and an agent can manage your calendar. And how do you see it, or how would you feel if you notice a company made like a 2 or 3 man company operating as if there are hundreds of them, but hundreds of agents operating many things, and you're getting a phone call from an agent, you're getting an email from an agent, and they're doing all this integrated work without users noticing. But how would you feel if you get a call or an email from an agent? Let's say you're able to figure out this an AI agent, send me an email. How do you think the public can accept it or approach it, or to really humanize it that way? How would you see it if it's a service you're getting from a company, but probably figure out this an agent or an AI agent?
Yeah, that's a great use case. So I actually advising the company that is exploring developing that technology for SIBs.
Right.
And I got to say, the agents are pretty good.
Right.
Like, I've interacted with them. They definitely work well at understanding the information that they're getting. They're able to interpret, the audio information that I'm providing to it.
The context,
and they can respond based on that pretty well. Is it something that's easy to detect? I think it's getting tougher and tougher. The processing power is increasing, so their ability to respond is becoming more seamless, like a typical conversation. What you find today with a lot of these is that there's always this pause, right? So it's like, "Hi, I'm Noel. I'm with Intelligenic. I'd like to talk to you about your problem. Do you have a few minutes?" Right? And then you're like, "Oh, yeah, I do have a few minutes." And then it's like maybe a second or two longer than a normal human would take to respond to that.
So they're getting more and more powerful. Like that's why they use a lot of energy now to process. Process that.
Definitely. Well, the models are getting better at being able to process that information, and then the underlying infrastructure itself is getting better at being able to process the information as well. So pretty soon we're going to get to a point where it's pretty seamless. So it'll be harder and harder to detect. But they're just like any other model. If you give it strange information, the response will be equally strange.
Yeah.
So you can't trick it, right? And so it doesn't understand always, whether you're giving it accurate information. But I would say that it is, it's something to watch. I don't know that it's quite there yet, although there are a lot of organizations that are
Yeah,
utilizing
the
it.
organization you see. And from what you just said, there are guardrails. People develop it. Like we at everybrain.ai, we do deploy that. I work with everybrain.ai. Yeah, we do deploy
How's it
that
working?
well.
How's it
It
working?
works well. I mean, people can schedule my calendar. You could schedule, and then based on emails, they can take, like now you can actually have a context of an email, right? Like even though you've been replying for a couple of days, it
Behind
doesn't.
the scenes, not
Yes.
actual like aid calling somebody though. But yes,
Yeah.
I think those agents work great.
They're working.
Because it's like a manual process. Like otherwise we'd have to do that, right?
Exactly.
But to be able to answer
so
and then
it's something that you have to repeat every time. So if you are repetitive, then it's going to handle it. So more and more, my only concern I'm trying to figure out is people more acceptable to it. Like I've seen people say, "Oh, that's an AI. Give me a call." I don't meet people accepting it now, but I believe there are guardrails against making crank calls. You know how people just call random calls and calling people, call collector, things like that, to call out. There are guardrails. I believe we still need more guardrails because the way the agents are going, I mean, they are really powerful. They're integrating our lives in such a way that you wouldn't be able to know. Like I would be able to use Noel Wilson's voice, and you don't have to use a stranger's voice. You record your voice in your organization, use it, and the voice is recorded and it's transcribed. And when they call you, your voice exactly answers the call, even though you're not there.
I mean, it's true. If it can actually work as well as myself or yourself, if you're going to use it, that'd be fantastic. I think we're still not quite there from the, that sort of interaction yet to get the level of acceptance that we need. I think there's some that's starting to get there. If I were to get one, I think I'm a little biased though, because I'm involved in the artificial intelligence industry.
Right.
So I'd probably be excited about it. I want to have the conversation just to see where people, I think a lot of people put off by it. So I'm not sure we're quite there yet to that type of artificial intelligence interaction, but what's happening behind the scenes and the automation of those activities, like sending emails or a text or something like that, I don't think that people would even know, because we're already, prior to the implementation of artificial intelligence, we're already using a lot of those automation techniques to send it. Like if you're operating a marketing campaign today, and you have of these more advanced technologies that are out there, you're automating sending emails to potential customers or existing customers,
and replying to those emails,
or through LinkedIn, right? The next logical step is just to have an agent that sits behind the scenes to analyze what's occurring, to have it craft the next message, based on
contextually, based on the context.
Right.
No,
that's incredibly acceptable. Like that, we're already, fully embracing that.
So just to build on that, how important is data governance and quality when building intelligent systems like this? There's been a cry in the US about there are no guardrails, there's no governance, and there's no protection. And some states are now trying to put in rules that would govern AI. But how important is data governance and quality and quality when building intelligent systems? What's your take on that?
It's critical. I mean, that is absolutely what drives the ability of these models and the agents that we're creating to use these models to produce anything of quality.
Right.
I'll get into the regulatory piece in a minute, but if you think about what makes these things amazing, it's that they're trained on this massive corpus of information, especially like large language models, like from OpenAI. They're trained on everything that's available, publicly available on the internet and any other data they have access to. Our platform and Intelligenic not only is trained on that information, but we're also continuing to enhance our platform based on the interactions that we have from our customers, the inputs that they provide and the outputs that they produce, if they opt in and they allow us to use that information. And then we cleanse it. We turn it into something that's more anonymized, so that we're not giving away any kind of sensitive information or data, but it's more standardized, but it's still best practices associated with building great product for that particular type of industry and that particular solution. And by virtue of this ongoing usage, we're going to accumulate the greatest corpus of software development lifecycle information available on the planet.
Right.
Because that's critical to our success.
Right.
To be able to do that. But the other side of that coin is what you started to talk about, the data governance. Like, how do you ensure that what you're actually using is not sensitive
Right.
and is allowed by
It's
the end
allowed.
user? You need to take that into account when you've built your solution. And we've done it. Like, it's very clear in the agreements that we put in place with our end users. We make it very known to them that, if you allow us to, our intent is to reuse the information that you provide in this anonymized fashion, that's critical. We have to be able to make your users aware of that.
So do you take liability? Are you liable for what Intelligenic is doing, or because if an organization just let you do that, are you liable for, let's say, these things do something and maybe they lose a lot of money because of something an agent did? Are you liable, or you sign a non-sign agreement to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, it's just like any other software.
Right,
When
okay.
you sign a license agreement for any other software, you're indicating that there are certain things that that are beyond your control, right?
Right.
In
Yeah,
the usage of that
you can't be
software.
responsible.
So it's not any different when it comes to artificial intelligence. But getting back to the data governance, it's critical for any artificial intelligence organization or application that is using this data to be very clear about how the data is being used. That's key to these regulations. As long as you're very clear about that and you've shared that with your users, that's how you really manage the governance. And then you give them the option to be able to allow the organization to use your data. All AI organizations operate in this fashion. They make that request. It's like, we'd like to use your information to make our system better, basically, is the goal.
Right, that's the goal.
And then some people said no, and that's fine. But there's plenty of people that are okay with allowing that to occur.
Let it train, use your data to train on.
Right. And then the other key to it is that we all are required to prevent the use of sensitive information. That needs to be protected. Like that, we've taken steps to ensure that is the case. We do not use sensitive information in any way in our products, or reuse that, share it with anyone else. Like, that's a requirement, and that's the case beyond just artificial intelligence. Anybody that has an application that is taking in that information, they're also entering into an agreement with their end users to ensure that they're protecting that sensitive information and they're not sharing it without that individual's permission.
Oh, that makes sense. I know. I want to talk a little bit about, just build on what I was asking about earlier on, about states putting in place laws, is being concerned about jobs, and those investing in AI, the major companies, the Fortune 500 companies investing in AI, they're making sure the wealth stays above states, and some local governments are trying to make sure the wealth gets distributed to the rest of the population. So there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear about AI taking jobs. What is the truth? What jobs are going to be most affected first? How do you see, like every other technology, there's usually a transformation and job transfer. But how do you see from your perspective?
A little differently than I think the mainstream media presents regarding artificial intelligence. I think mainstream media likes to paint a picture that artificial intelligence is an existential threat to humanity.
Right.
I think it's the exact opposite. I think it's the greatest force multiplier we've ever seen in the history of humanity. I think that the way we'd be looking at it is that if you can make the individuals that are working for you more productive, that's a good thing. If that single individual can do the work of 10, why wouldn't you want that?
Why wouldn't you want that?
Well, right. So then the next question that gets asked, well, then I don't need to hire 10 more people. Well, I'd say that's the opposite. You probably would want to hire 10 more people, because then you're able to get the work of 100 people.
100 people.
It continues to multiply and multiply, right? It's like these organizations don't have enough people to get all the work done, the successful ones, right? So again, I look at it as it's a force multiplier. It is absolutely something that is going to benefit humanity and just make us better. The people that are most at risk are the people that are ignoring the benefit and are not embracing it. So you behooves yourself to understand how to use these technologies so that you can just make yourself better and more productive. If you do that, you're going to be successful now and well into the future.
That's a good one there, right? Yeah, you're very right. So how can organizations, like just talking about that, how can organization empower employees to work with AI or automation tools? Because somehow most employees are still hesitant. They feel like, in the ages back then when you had to Google something, it felt like if you Google something, it means you don't know what you're talking about. Eventually, organization embrace Googling. They could do a research on something. You don't have to memorize everything. You could Google and see what was used on the left or what was used on the. But now, how can an organization empower employees or encourage them to use these tools without being afraid of thinking they are not productive enough or they are not knowledgeable enough to use to be? That's why they depend on these tools.
I worry that people felt the same way about reading and about
Right.
going to libraries.
Right.
Why do I need to do that? I can go and, work harder. I don't need to read this. Why do I need to get that information? It's the same concept, right? It's like, look, if you're going to read something, the next step would be, well, am I going to use the internet to search? Before the internet, I had to go to the library. Like for your younger viewers probably don't even know what that is. It's a big building filled with books, right? So that's the same concept of the internet. The internet is just a virtual version of that has all that information. Artificial intelligence is basically your librarian to go find that information for you and present it back to you in an understandable fashion, right? And so it's natural to be afraid of something new. It's human nature. We always feel this way.
Right.
When we created Lever, I don't know when that happened. I don't know my history well enough. Let's just say it was several thousand years ago. Okay. When we created the wheel, like everybody was freaked out by that. People that were pulling sleds that didn't have wheels, I'm sure were worried about that until they realized, oh my gosh, I can pull this thing so much more efficiently because there's no wheels attached to it.
Right. You go faster.
Or modern nature. Well, if you think back to more modern in nature, let's go back to the early 20th century, maybe even before that, in the 1800s, okay, late 1800s, when automobiles were new. Okay, at that time, all those cars were built by hand from scratch,
Exactly.
which is insane when you think about it, right? Because what's probably one of the most prevalent pieces of technology on the planet? It's an automobile, right? They're everywhere in every continent. Most people know how to drive, or they've been in an automobile, right? But that never would have happened unless a gentleman by the name of Henry Ford hadn't come along and realized that, oh, wow, this is a really popular mode of transportation. People are getting tired of walking to work, or taking the train,
horses,
or riding a horse, right? I probably need to figure out a way to make this more efficient. So he introduced the concept of moving assembly line to auto manufacturing. And when he did that, it completely transformed Ford's business. I think they produced something like 90 million Model Ts as a result. But it didn't just change his business, it changed transportation, because suddenly cars became the number one mode of transportation, right? And it also changed the industry, where everybody else followed suit and started to do that. I think that artificial intelligence is very similar to the very the use of it. Now, if you think back to that same analogy of the automobile, there were individuals and industries that were impacted. There's right. And there's going to be that main case that happened.
Rearing. People used to rear horses for business.
Yeah.
Farmers used to produce food for horses. Stables.
It's like buggy whip manufacturers aren't really doing so hot right now. But those people that were recognized the advancement and realized that they needed to make a transition and accepted that and did the work themselves to make that happen, they were very successful going forward. And a great example, I think, are the people that were working at Ford's assembly plant. They increased their wages. It was something by somewhere between 4 and 10x as a result of the working in
skills that
So there's real benefits that come along with it. You just have to recognize that it's not a threat. You should embrace it. You should take advantage of the technology, become as skilled and as well versed in it as you possibly can, and it will benefit you. And you will be very useful and very productive in the next generation of this economy that is very much going to be driven by artificial intelligence.
So briefly, what skills will be most valuable in an AI-powered workplace today? Just briefly, just for our listeners, people who are thinking like, what's AI? What I need to be productive? Just building on what you're saying, what are the skills you think they can work on today when it comes to AI.
I mean, at the base core, it's just being familiar with the providers and the technology that they provide and how to use it and how to get the most out of it. I know that seems like that's pretty high level, but it's not as hard as people think. So
Right.
if you are a strong critical thinker, and you can explain yourself well in writing, then you're going to do well with using
Yeah.
artificial intelligence, because it's all about understanding whatever the problem is that you're trying to solve and
Right.
recognizing this is a tool that's going to help you do that and be able to put it into terms that the tool will be able to utilize to be able to produce an outcome for you.
Right.
It's the same. Just imagine that it's not an actual computer that's doing this. It's a human,
Right.
but it's an
Same
expert in its field. And you needed to get that person to do something. Well, you would need to be able to describe your problem
to the
in
person.
extremely deep detail and be able to explain it to that person and get them to do something. If you can't do that, then you're going to struggle. But I think most humans can do that. They can
Can do that.
explain that they've got a problem, and that if they're seeking help from someone, they can put it in terms that that person will understand, so we'll get help from them. I mean, those are the skills we're talking about. Just
Right.
don't be afraid of it. Go use it.
Yeah.
Try it.
Try
Ask it to
it.
do something.
Do
Yeah.
something. You're
And
right.
then next thing you're going to be like, what this thing will
So,
do. Like,
I
I
mean, you're
trained
right.
for.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, let's we're rounding up. I mean, from what you're saying, it's we want encouraging people to be able to get familiar with some of these tools. We at everybrain.ai, we have a program where we do help users and businesses adapt to AI, whatever they want to do. If they're thinking of adopting AI in their businesses or in their personal lives, or maybe as a student. But I mean, this is good. I mean, we're seeing the trend. Just to round up, if someone is listening and wants to explore intelligent automation for their businesses, what would be the best first step that you suggest? Any suggestion, any advice for them? Explore intelligent automation or AI for their business. What would be their first step?
I see what you're saying. Yeah. I think the best first step would be to do a critical analysis of the workflows in your
Right.
business.
Right.
Like, all businesses have at least one workflow, if not many, that they operate to execute the business.
Mhm.
So identify what all those are. They could be, what your payroll process, what does that look like? Right? What's your account payables process look like? What does your content creation for marketing look like? What does software development look like for you, in my case, right? But there's probably many workflows that you have, and many organizations probably haven't taken the time to think about it, because it's just kind of, it happens, right? But it's time to think about it. And then once you've thought about them, you've identified them, identify each of the steps that you typically take to fulfill those workflows. And I think over time, going through that exercise, you'll be able to recognize certain steps that a human may not need to fulfill, but it takes a lot of time and effort for that human to fulfill it. And if you can substitute that human with this artificial intelligence agent to take that on for them, you're not freeing up that human to do something else. I guarantee you that what you're going to find when you look at each of those workflows and those steps in it that are really human intensive, they probably take more time than they should, which doesn't allow those humans that you need to get other stuff done. And now suddenly they'll be able to get other stuff done. They'll be more productive. And before you know it, as a business, you're going to be more productive, and you're going to be more successful at being able to accomplish your business goals, selling more products, or helping more people in a hospital, for example, delivering more goods if you're, some sort of a shipping organization, providing more vehicle. I don't know, whatever it is. It's just going to make you that much more productive to be able to do more of what you haven't been able to do, because you're stuck in these workflows dealing with these highly manual steps and processes. Artificial intelligence is great at alleviating those challenges that businesses face with those highly manual steps and processes, and making them more efficient completely.
Oh, that's a great advice. A lot of businesses are at least certainly going to benefit from what you just said, because a lot of them are confused. They don't know what to do. There's AI and automation everywhere. They feel like maybe I'm not ready for it. Maybe I'm not doing the right business. But from what you just said, a lot of businesses, when they listen, they're certainly going to benefit. I mean, our time is up. It's been amazing discussion with you, Noel Wilson, CEO of Intelligenic AI. It's been a privilege. Thank you for coming to this podcast again one more time. We're going to put it out there, intelligenic.ai, and you are on multiple platforms. We're going to share with us, we're going to share to the rest of the listeners. Maybe they're going to reach out again and connect with you. Probably they have a project, and certainly most businesses, they certainly need a Intelligenic tool to integrate, especially developers, right? People, companies that need the development tool. And that's our goal, promote such businesses, talk about such businesses. Without this podcast, I would never have known that this exists, but I'm certainly going to put it out there and let people know that this is what's happening. Thank you very much. Any last word for the listeners? Anything you want to say before you go?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been an absolute pleasure. I love talking about artificial intelligence and how it's going to benefit humanity. And I certainly would love to help any organizations that need help with software development. That's key to and core to what we do. And just come to intelligenic.ai and you can learn more about how we do that. And that's how you can contact us as well.
Great. Perfect. I know AI, we're going at it fast pace. Probably in the next 6 months, I'm going to invite you back here again to tell me what's changed and what's stable and what's going on. Thank you very much. And we're going to talk about your journey. Thank you, Lee. Appreciate it. Bye for now.